It's time to talk about X-Men 97. Is it time for this other shoe to drop? Let's find out.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
So as I've said in previous videos, X-Men 97 is one of the highlights of my week here on the channel. Now, of course, I love to stream and hang out with all of you, but I get excited every Wednesday morning when I wake up and it's time to watch X-Men 97. For the past 5 weeks, we've seen all kinds of iconic X-Men stories adapted for the small screen, all in the guise of the Jim Lee costume, unifying the X-Men experience into one era. I loved it so far. And then today's episode dropped, and it's just as good. So folks, I don't want to sound redundant and boring each and every week, but it is nice to be surprised pleasantly each and every week. Like I've said in previous videos, I like the X-Men just a bit, a smidge Pinciotti. So this show is very, very refreshing for me, that it represents all of the X-Men, and it does the thing that the X-Men comics do, but literally no other X-Men property has done before, and it's make the X-Men feel big, like it's part of the Marvel universe, but it's part of a bigger universe. Because if you don't really read X-Men comics, and you've only seen the movies, or maybe just the 90s show, you may know a little bit of this, but the X-Men get involved in outer space. And it's not just a once or twice thing, it's multiple times. X-Men spans the galaxy, the universe. There's the epic Shi'ar Empire in this episode. We also see the Kree, the people that Captain Marvel come from. So this episode is Life Death Episode 2. This picks up from the episode 2 weeks prior, the story between Forge and Storm. But we don't start out with Forge and Storm, we start out in space. And that's what makes me appreciate this show, is Marvel's creating an animated universe that feels epic, bigger than the movies ever did. Because one thing a lot of people don't take into account, us fans back in the day, we would think about these epic superhero movies and then we'd realize, oh wait, Disney doesn't hold the rights. So we kind of deflated ourselves very, very quickly. Now that the monolith owns everything and the movies have sucked, well, maybe the animation can do it right, because this wouldn't be the first time we've seen a shared Marvel universe in animation. The 90s show is part of a shared universe. Spider-Man crosses over. Spider-Man crosses over with Fantastic Four, I think. Yeah, in the Secret Wars episode. So all of these shows were part of the same canon, the same world, the same universe. Secret Wars back in the day was to cartoons as to what Infinity War and Endgame are to film. It was a big epic, and it was an event. Every time they would show those 2 or maybe it was 4 episodes back to back, they would like block them off. They would do them all at once. It was an event, and I watched it each and every time. Marvel and animation go hand in hand for me. To take it back just briefly for a second, I even like the old Marvel superhero show. Every era of Marvel animation is fascinating to me, because normally Marvel animation is a reflection of how small of a company Marvel truly was. They didn't have much money. They were bankrupt many times. They were bought out. One of them was a coloring process company. It was all kinds of different things, all kinds of different companies that owned Marvel. And so a lot of their animation had reflected that, including the stuff we grew up with in the 90s. And now we're finally seeing Marvel animation when they don't have as many limitations. And thankfully, they're not limiting themselves in creativity with X-Men 97, because normally when you have these episodes, you have these big budgets, but then people just like piss the money away. It's like, yeah, we got the voice cast, we got all these things, but we delivered you something that wasn't very good. And thankfully, episode 6 of X-Men 97 continues the path of being good. So like I said a moment ago, it starts out with the Shi'ar Empire. We see the Lander, we see the Imperial Guard, we see everybody, and we also see Charles Xavier. So yes, Professor X isn't dead. Now, again, like I say in every one of these episodes, if you've read the X-Men comics of the 1980s or 70s, you know all these stories. Like, basically, for me, it's what is next. And if you want to get an abridged version of this very quickly, I suggest you listen to X-Men the audio dramas. They're over on Podbean, iTunes. I recommend them in every X-Men episode. But if you're really hungry for more X-Men, or you want to find out how this story from X-Men 97 ends very early, well then make sure you listen to that show. I always mention that because I'm not really shocked by anything new. What I'm surprised is how it's being adapted. That's what we're all waiting for, is these great stories to be adapted. When it comes to these big budget films, we're always perplexed. Why do they choose this? Why do they go that way? Why is it Morbin time? I don't know. Outside of the internet meme, I don't get it. But what I do get here is something massive, and I really, really like it. Now, one thing I want to talk about too, with referencing all eras of X-Men, is this episode is a very artist-heavy episode, meaning if you know iconic X-Men art or poses, you're going to really like this one, because a few of the Shi'ar characters look ripped out of the comic book, meaning they look just like John Byrne drew them. So if you enjoy your characters from comic books looking exactly the same in the cartoon, well then you're going to love this episode. the movies could learn a few things about that. Like they say, there's a reason these stories are iconic, so why change them in the first place? So it's supposed to be a big deal that Professor X is still alive, but like I said a moment ago, if you read the books, you know he was never dead. It gets even crazier. Will we ever get the Shadow King? I hope. That would be a bitchin' fight. But more on Professor X fighting in a moment. So the episode kind of jumps right back to Life Death. And for those who do not know, Life Death is the story between Forge and Storm. Storm is rendered powerless from the attack on the United Nations building, and she is left to her own devices. She leaves the X-Men because she doesn't think she's valuable, and she goes off and she's with Forge. And Forge and her forge a relationship, and as you saw in previous episodes, they're attacked by a shadow creature, and it hurts Forge after he reveals to Storm that he may not be as upfront as he had said in previous encounters. He had worked on things that then would be engineered to hurt mutant kind, so Storm felt betrayed. That makes sense, but as a guy, you wouldn't lead with that. Hey, I saved your life, I care about you, but I also might have been responsible for the death of thousands of mutants. Sorry. No. But anyway, I've enjoyed Life Death. I got the book from back in the day. It's cool. This cartoon, however, is very, very good at taking something that's a lot deeper and emotional and keeping it on pace to be entertaining and consumable by all ages. Remember, folks, while X-Men's going to talk about deeper issues, and this episode is full of them, it does need to appeal to everybody, meaning it shouldn't be hard R. Like, X-Men can be PG-13 because it reaches more people that way, and it kind of always has been. If you want our X-Men, you know, watch Logan, Deadpool, and read those X-Factory books from the 90s. But this is classic X-Men, where blood and gore are a part of it, but they're used in a stylistic way. They're like John Carpenter films. Well, not The Thing. That Thing. Whew. I love that movie. So I always give X-Men 97 credit for understanding the characters and the little details here and there, and this episode, again, is full of them. So we get to see Storm's claustrophobia at play twice. Now, they treat this like you may never know Storm was claustrophobic. It's one of those parts of her character that is not always adapted. Why would you? You know, you need Superman's weakness. You need the kryptonite in every story to kind of tell how to bring down the god. You need to talk about Batman's weakness with his parents or Uncle Ben's guilt on Spider-Man's psyche. All of those things are there. But Storm's claustrophobia, while a part of it, isn't the most defining part of her character. So back to the artist point. When Storm is having a psychic vision of claustrophobia, her trapped inside of a coffin, we see her rendered and drawn just like Jack Kirby art or maybe even Jim Steranko. These stark eyes and this black heavy shadow, it really stands out like a comic book. It's one of those things where you have to look at it for a second to go, oh, it's the shadow of the face, the way it sits on there. But it's really artistic and cool, and it shows you just what you can do with animation. For all the CGI crap they do put in the show, there are little things like this that are redeeming and, dare I say, elevate the show to a status that's rarely seen in modern animation. Rarely do you get a show that gets every era and aspect of what makes the show or the thing or the comic book popular in the first place. So I'm going to tell this a little differently. Normally I try to keep these things chronological, but since there's two stories at play right here, I'm just going to tell you the rest of Life Death, and then we're going to talk about the bigger implication with the Shi'ar and Lalandra, because that talks about the theme of this episode, humanity and relationships. But to finish out Life Death, now Storm has to save Forge, so she goes out to this abandoned mine with Forge to go out and find this salve that's going to protect him from this disease, this virus. And he wants to go with her. Now, at first he tells her, you know, I don't want to die alone. And you think, this badass Forge? That's a human moment. Okay, fine. But then you realize that there's a shaft, a mine shaft, where Storm needs to go, and he wanted to be there to support her through her claustrophobia. So I thought that was a pretty cool way to have the character lie, but was it really? It was like a little white lie. I like this, a little fib to help protect the character of Storm. So long story short, Storm overcomes her claustrophobia, and she regains her powers and saves the day. But what's nice about this, and the part that I don't know if a lot of people are going to talk about, is Storm saves the day without her mutant powers. She saves the day with her humanity, and that's the important part, because the whole theme of X-Men is mutant versus human, but this show goes to show you that there's really not much of a difference. Maybe she has superpowers, maybe she's exotic, maybe she's this and that, but at the end of the day, while she is a mutant, she's still a human. She has humanity, and that's the important part of that. So she reclaims her humanity, she reclaims her mutant powers, and she also gets her hair back. It kind of magically grows back in this thunderstorm. But the cool thing she gets is the John Byrne classic Storm costume. Now, I have the figure, it's still in the box. I'm not going to open it for this video, but I do have it, and I'm very happy to see the classic designs on screen. Are we going to go backwards? Are we going to see the John Byrne X-Men? I mean, we got Colossus, and we have Nightcrawler on the team. That could be kind of cool. I'm pretty sure they refer to Jean as Marvel Girl at some point as well. But I really like the Jim Lee stuff, so Just keep her with the Jim Lee Cyclops and all will be well. Now, Storm and Forge's story ends with Storm turning on the TV and seeing the mutant massacre in Genosha, and that sets us up for the next episode. But the part of the episode that I found to be the most interesting was Lilandra, Charles Xavier, and Lilandra's sister Warbird. So again, if you've read the comics, you know the story. Professor X goes off with Lilandra, they fall in love, they get married, he becomes the emperor of the Shi'ar Empire, and Lilandra's sister Warbird challenges that. She wants him gone. She wants him to make the ultimate sacrifice for their people. And so what happens is, they're going to do this rite of passage where Lilandra is going to wipe Professor X's memories, and he's going to forget the X-Men. And at first he agrees, and so on the day when they ask him the final time, do you essentially submit? Will you wipe out the memories of this and that? They ask him, will you forget your X-Men? And he goes, no. He's willing to forget his humanity, he's willing to forget his life on Earth, but he's not willing to forget his children. And he uses his mutant powers to help these people see the error of their ways. And so this is where we get to see Professor X in his domain, the astral plane. He really is the most powerful on the team. I get it, Genes, Phoenix, and all this stuff, but Professor X can control himself, making him the most threatening. But he's also the most benevolent, and that makes him the most interesting as well. So here on the astral plane, we see Professor in a classroom explaining to the Shi'ar Empire why their views are wrong on how they colonize the galaxy. He explains to them that their assimilation isn't to make anything better, it's to take away what makes each part unique. And that reflects what we have with Storm and Forge about mutant and humanity. To try to get rid of mutants, it takes away humanity from society. It's a deeper parallel that isn't discussed in a lot of these things, and again, that is why I like this show so much, because it has this depth to it. It's not this show about modern ideological politics and all this other crap. It's not in there. It's the X-Men. This is what you've wanted forever. Realistically, this is gearing up to be the best X-Men cartoon of all time. I hope. We have 3 episodes left. 4, technically. It could be bad. It could be great. I don't know. But what I have seen here this week was another win for the X-Men 97 show. But what I really enjoyed about this episode was the way the Shi'ar Empire saw humanity. They treated humanity the way humanity treats mutants. And it was interesting to see that dichotomy. How no matter what, the superior race feels superior, and it will always talk down, look down, and all of these things. It doesn't matter if you're white or black or where you come from. If you think you're better, that's it. And the Shi'ar Empire thinks it's better than humanity. And I found that interesting that they were so overt. Some people might say it's a little on the nose, but I think it's important to show that the mutant struggle goes beyond their planet into the stars. Humanity is a trait of mutant kind. Humanity is part of the struggle for mutants. It's part of acceptance. It's also part of who they are, because they might have the X gene and be the other, but they're also a person at the end of the day. And this episode goes really deep to show you just that. And so on the astral plane, we see Professor X talking about the sacrifice and humanity and all of those wonderful things that we just discussed a moment ago. And then he gets a psychic vision of the death of Gambit. And last week's episode was heartbreaking, and we get to see Professor X's response to the death of Gambit. And that is so powerful that he has given up to try to be with Lilandra and the people of the Shi'ar Empire. And he's decided, I'm going back to Earth to save the X-Men because I've lost one of my children. And we end the show that way. Once again, X-Men 97 proves itself to be a fun, worthwhile addition to the X-Men franchise while being fun and enjoyable each and every week. I can't wait to see where it goes. Right now we have Genosha. We're on the brink of, everything collapsing around the world. And we got Professor X coming back. What's this epic battle gonna be? Well, we do know one thing before the episode completely ended, that it was Mr. Sinister, responsible for Bolivar Trask, the new Sentinels, and everything that went down. So Mr. Sinister is setting up to be the big bad of this episode, and it makes me happy that I got his action figure right back here on the shelf. Now again, folks, I'm not giving any of these episodes a number score. We'll do that at the end of the season. But make sure that you guys are tuned in each and every week here on the channel, on X, on every platform to hear us talk about X-Men 97, the most surprising event on TV this year. And yes, you saw my face. I'm surprised that I'm saying that myself. So folks, I don't have much else to say about X-Men, but I want to know what you have to say, so tell me down in the comments below. I'll be checking those out. But thank you to everyone, the new subscribers, our new growth. Thanks to WrestleLamia for giving us a shout out over on Twitter. We appreciate it. We'll talk about that on the podcast tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But I will be back next week with more X-Men. I'll be back next time with more videos. So be on the lookout for those and get ready for Wokebusters, folks. It'll be ready to go on Kickstarter at the end of the month. This is a big, epic comic book. It's all done. I can't wait to bring it to you. It's going to change comic books. It's the biggest comic book event of 2024, 2025, and so on. And the story is simple. In our world, everyone outrages and gets offended on the internet, and it causes problems. But in this this world. The outrage turns people into literal monsters, and they destroy society. So it's up to the woke busters to save society from itself. Like I said, folks, it's 105 pages long, written and drawn by me, and if you like stealing solo, you're going to love this, and if you've never heard of me, you're going to love this, because comedy is the universal language, and that book is funny. But until next time, folks, I ask you to do 4 things. Be smart, be safe, be cool, but always be excellent to each other.